So, Jordan, here's a new question for you that I was actually interested in. This is me being an audience member. Have you heard of molten salt nuclear reactors powered by thoriums?
Yes.
So, what's the deal with that?
The
Because
deal is that it's a complete con. Anybody that's saying otherwise, first off, just know this. There are a million of these little rabbit holes that people go down of thorium 10x 180, fusion power, molten salts.
okay, wait, let me before you go into this, let me just tell people in case you don't know what it is. So I found out about it today. So thorium is basically a substitute for uranium. There are a few advantages that I have read about associated with creating electricity from thorium. First of all, it's difficult to do. China is doing a pilot project right now, and we'll find out if it is possible or not. But the argument is, first of all, that it uses no water to cool the reactor, which is one of the things that you have to do with uranium, which is very water intensive. The second thing is in thorium waste, as opposed to having to keep it for thousands of years, only has to be kept for 500 years, which
Oh,
is
wow.
still a long time. And
So just half
lastly,
of the span of the Roman Empire. That's all we last as a civilization. Eh? Well, hashtag goals.
yeah, and last one is that thorium is very unlikely to be used for weapons, which is partly the reason why the U.S. abandoned it in the first place, because they initially wanted to create nuclear power from thorium, but then they realized that they're not going to be able to make nuclear weapons, which was the whole point of making nuclear reactors in the first place. So they abandoned that project until recently. China is doing a test project to match their 2015 carbon emission goals. Now, Jordan, what do you say? What were you saying? So it's the same thing with a different name.
Same thing with a different name. Every time, there's always all of these new whiz bang things that are just around the corner when it comes to nuclear power that they've been talking about since the 50s. Thorium was big in the 70s, I think, or 60s maybe. And the pilot ones that they're always talking about, first off, they use uranium anyway.
That's
They
true.
have to use it to enrich the thorium. So
That
you
is
are
true.
getting that waste product regardless. When it comes to the molten salts, what they never tell you is that Russia tried to do it. They realized that it was just so prone to nuclear fires. Molten salts in the US, when they tried to do it, they realized it's the most complicated waste to clean up out of all of them. Thorium is another one of these myths that they always say, it just hasn't been invested in. You just need to invest in it. No, what you need to invest in is renewables. That's what you need to invest in. Stop going into these technological wonder world things that are always brought out. And this is really interesting. Thorium has huge surges every time there's a nuclear meltdown. So around Chernobyl and around Fukushima, you will see it flooded in the press. How do we stop these in the future? Well, thorium, will probably be ready in 2 weeks. We're doing trials at the moment, and then they shut up about it, and then nerds on the internet just keep it going, right? Now, I've watched videos of engineers talking about this. So I'm not putting it in inverted commas, they are engineers. But the thing is, engineers have such a narrow stream of consciousness. They're just looking at, can we build this thing? They're not thinking about maintenance. They're not thinking about where to store the waste. All they're concerned with is building the project. And then everything else like that is just very shallow afterwards. And I remember when they were talking about thorium, they said that the experiments in the past that they did created this is hazy now, but I'm pretty sure it's tritium.
Damn.
It did. It absolutely did create tritium, but they just say it didn't, and then you just move on to the next point. But tritium is a really toxic substance. It's in fact, there's a UK Parliament did an inquiry into it. It's 5 times more dangerous than what they originally thought it was anyway. These are things that it's just a lot of the time, and the reason that you don't see this is the same thing with pesticides. These countries just want to keep pumping out nuclear energy so they can make weapons, really. Let's be honest about it. It is a big coincidence if you look at the countries that have nuclear power and the countries that produce nuclear weapons. There's a few counterexamples like Japan, but the vast majority of them they're doing it for weapons. In fact, the US admitted it in some papers a while back, I think under Rick Perry. Rick Perry was saying, if we shut down all of these nuclear power plants, how are we going to treat our nuclear submarines? So they're admitting it. They're admitting that the reason they're keeping it going is to create weapons, because it makes no economic sense at all. They've never worked by themselves. They've always had to be massively subsidized. They are not worth the money that they ever make. I think that there was a study that came out from Germany that said that they've never turned a profit. Not one nuclear power plant ever in the history of the world has ever turned a profit. And anyone that says otherwise is not talking about startup costs. They're just saying, oh, after you massively subsidize the entire construction of it, and then a company just buys it off the government so it has even less oversight after that, then they're turning a profit. It's a terrible idea. Anything that you hear about fusion, thorium, some miracle nuclear power plant that runs off of nuclear waste from other nuclear power plants, just know they've been saying it since the 70s. It's like the AI argument. It's just, around the corner, hover cars, it's that kind of stuff.
Okay, there's a question by Notice Oren, which I don't understand, but maybe I think I understand what the question is. But Ali, could you please ask Jordan if are small modular reactors also a grift, or are they more potentially viable?
Same thing. Go back, look at the history of nuclear modulars, small nuclear modulars. They've sunk billions and billions and billions of dollars into this. Everyone always brings out these stupid talking points of, oh, Bill Gates is sinking money into it and he's smart, so he's fucking, that's obviously going to work. Yeah, well, I can bring out billionaires too, like Elon Musk, who says that it's such a stupid idea to invest in nuclear energy. He's just talking about the economic impacts of it. But also small nuclear modular reactors, exactly the same thing. Oh, we're going to invest all of this money into it. Are you getting any returns whatsoever? No. So what we're going to do is invest more money into it. It's an idiot talking point. Like I saw the dickheads on Planet America saying that of, oh, that's just one positive legacy of Donald Trump. This is how brainwashed these people are, how much they believe the press narrative, the people that are in that mainstream press narrative. It's fucking pathetic. Think about what Planet America is. It is just relaying CNN talking points to an Australian audience. Can you imagine how indoctrinated you would be? And they sit there and say, oh, the one positive aspect of Donald Trump's era is that he invested a lot into nuclear power. Why the fuck do you think a Republican is investing a bunch of money into nuclear energy? Do you think it's for noble environmental purposes? Is that what he's doing there? Is he secretly doing some long game like Obama is to just make sure that, we have a CO2 free future? They don't give a fuck about that. It's because of weapons. And a huge, well-funded nuclear lobby group, which is the thing that I'm very concerned about with all of this talk. But I think that renewables is just going to win this fight anyway, because despite all the handicaps that they have across the planet, they're just steaming ahead to the point that in China, for instance, like a lot of places, you don't even need subsidies. They're just so profitable that the private enterprise is doing it anyway. But, in the US, there's the nuclear energy lobby is a lot. I don't know why it is, but also you need to know this as well. The guy, Sigmund Freud's nephew, Edward Bernays, he was critical in setting up nuclear energy's image worldwide. The father of the propaganda model. He was integral in this whole, nuclear energy is the way of the future. It'll just power everyone's houses. Such a little amount of energy is needed. All of that stuff. He was the guy that's set up the talking point templates. But what you need to understand is it's just it's a secret fossil fuel lobby. And something that really scares me. It honestly terrifies me how little, how much they squash any investigations into the impacts of living around nuclear power plants, what to do with the waste. All of that is just squashed.
Okay, so I've got a question. So that I understand why developing countries, or even countries that aren't part of the nuclear group, let's just say, that want to develop it, they probably have ulterior motives of developing the weapons, like North Korea and Iran are like known examples. But we've had history of every country that has ever achieved that nuclear power status has done it through a fake premise of we just want it for energy. My question is, that explains that aspect. But why is the US still adamant? Like they've got more nuclear weapons than you could ever want, and they're constantly trying to work out how to reduce that with Russia. So it can't just be weapons. There must be some economic interests that are driving people like Bill Gates to invest in it and then obviously propagate it because of their investments.
Well, I think that there's two things that are happening with Bill Gates. The first one is, for some reason, the most intelligent people on Earth are enamored by nuclear energy. See, one to one, the biggest nerds you will ever meet in your life that are intelligent in every other respect, for some reason, they just get a hard on about nuclear power. I don't know what it is. It's kind of just like Tesla cars. You know, every autist on Earth is obsessed with Tesla.
Is it because of
Same thing with that? And
is it because it's green, the waste? It is pretty cool.
I think it must be something like that. It's some kind of inadequacy complex of, oh, it's so powerful, it's the power of the sun, some lame thing like that in their head.
That does make sense. Yeah.
But I don't know. I think it is either that or he's figured out that this is a great way to get endless government subsidies if you can get in on that gravy train.
The other aspect I think could be that if, let's say, you believe in renewables as the way future, right? Yeah, sure, there's going to be companies that will be making solar panels. There's going to be a lot of companies that will profit from it. But I think the distribution of the benefits would be more equitable. Like now you already see people that installed solar panels on their roofs are sometimes getting more money as opposed to giving money to energy companies because they're supplying it to the grid. However, if your power reserve was based on nuclear, then you know who the money is going to. It's not going to random people. It's going to the corporation that is profiting from that built that nuclear power plant in the first place. So I suppose it could be a way of making more money. Renewables would be less profitable.
That's why a lot of big investors put so much money into it, because it's all about controlling the fuel supply, which is another thing that's incredibly dangerous about nuclear power that no one mentions. But you go to Olympic Dam. In fact, I was talking to an elder the other day from Olympic Dam, coincidentally, and he was just saying the cancer rate around Olympic Dam is through the roof. Every second person he knows has cancer, but again, silence. Nothing about it. There's no studies into it at all, because BHP just makes a mint out of mining all of this shit out of the ground. It's the same site that you see over and over again. Anyone that lives anywhere near a uranium mine, cancer, far as the eye can see. Huge loss in biodiversity, because think about it. You have people that are as smart as coal miners digging fucking uranium out of the ground and then putting all the waste into a pit. What do you think happens to the pit? It evaporates. The water evaporates into the air, then it rains, goes straight into the ecosystem. It's pretty straightforward stuff. Like, it's really poisoning the planet.
Did you see Fat Dak on Crack's comment? I don't know if it's worth reading. He said nuclear energy. Did you see that, Ali?
No.
I don't know if this is worth reading, but it said nuclear energy, 0.07 deaths per terawatt hour. CO2.
Yeah, and I'm glad that he said that point, because this is what I'm talking about. Secret fossil fuel industry. That point right there is the nuclear power equivalent of, there are no, the climate is changing, but it's still up in the air as to whether or not it's because of fossil fuels. So that's the nuclear power version of that they say, it's 0.7 least jets per megawatt hour, which is a ridiculous statement, because the same thing happened. If you go look at what happened to Chernobyl, I think the official estimate is something along the lines of like 40 deaths. I can't remember. This was a long time ago. You look at official stats from the Ukraine, you look at official stats from, I think, what was the other country that was around? Belarus. They're saying that it's 1 to 2 million casualties. Ongoing effects of Chernobyl, where you have a these countries are allocating, I think, something along the lines of 7% of their budget a year to treating the ailments of the people that are still dying from these. Like once radiation gets into your DNA, every generation after that gets more and more fucked. They've done it on rats, right? Like the first generation, their DNA is altered, but then the next generation, their DNA is even more altered because you're reproducing with a fucked DNA. It just keeps going down the line.
And also, like, these deaths argument, it's going to be so, because it's the whole causation is not correlation thing. Like, how the hell do you prove that someone that got cancer was because they lived in the vicinity of waste, or it was because of that lean and cuisine Coles pack that they've been eating all their life?
Exactly. And that's a classic. This is the classic denier of all pollutants. They always say, you can't prove that it was that. It was for all of these external environmental factors. But you look at all the studies, it's just like, the amount of leukemia within a 5-kilometer radius of the people living around a nuclear power plant, twice the number. Like you look at anywhere where there's uranium coming out, there's just massive cancer rates, but none of that is accredited to the deaths. It's the same thing that happened in Fukushima. Then you get all the lines of, oh, well, those were all old nuclear power things that were like running. And it's just like, yeah, Gen 3 still are the ones that are getting built today. In fact, they're getting built with the safety pieces that were supposedly supposed to stop Fukushima and Chernobyl, deliberately built out of them to cut costs. Like, you think that there's a bunch of smart people that are building these things. It's just like, think about this shit, right? 85% of apartments in Australia are defective. That's fucking apartments. We've been building them for thousands of years. People cut costs to save money. They do that with when they're building nuclear power plants.
Jesus, that's scary.
Like I'm really that fucking less deaths per megawatt hour. That is, I'm telling you, the central node propagandic piece. In fact, the Academy of Sciences in New York just looked at it. They confirmed that there's been 1 million deaths from Chernobyl. That fucking blows that one out of the water just from that. You know, but what you will hear is things from the WHO saying that there was 40 deaths there. And that's because when there was a Chernobyl hit, they went there for the first 3 days. They just got in their cars, looked around, just went, oh, there's a body bag there. And then they fucked off. And then that was the official number from that point on.
Fuck.
It's look, you look at any pollutant, it's exactly the same thing. I'm talking about pesticides as well. And now the stuff that I'm looking into pesticides now, like just decimating the environment, but also public health as well. But because there is a massive industry behind it, billions and billions and billions of dollars, the same thing. No one's died from nuclear energy. Okay, do a study on it. No, we won't be doing that.
Damn.
You know?
All right, fair enough. Look, you've made your arguments.
Sorry.
Like,
I don't know why it angers me so much.
Yeah. Like I've always said this, you have changed my opinion on nuclear like years ago, because I was one of those hipsters that were looking at like all of these studies and being like, damn, maybe nuclear is the answer. So look, you've made your point clear, but I suppose this is something that doesn't work too well with the audience because you're swimming against the waves here. But
well, surely not all of them though, right? Like
not all of them, but Jordan is right. There, for some reason, even though it's such a bizarre thing to be emotional about, but a lot of people really like nuclear power. And I think Jordan is right.
Yeah.
It's from the idea that, oh my God, it's so powerful. Like it's getting like you get a high from being able to control something that's that intense.
But also they're always like, it's clean. That's the main thing they say.
Yeah, but it's clean as long as it stays inside of these, like,
it's not clean. There's fucking nuclear waste.
If it gets out, it's worse than
and
anything
extracting
else.
it from the ground. The whole thing's dirty from beginning to end, and transporting it as well. You got to think about that. Like, dude, think about how scary this is. I was reading of an instance where in Brazil they were transporting uranium, active uranium, into a nuclear power plant, and because it's Brazil,
into fucking Carnival.
Yeah, because this is the other thing. They build it near ghettos because no fucking normal person that's a senator or anything, everyone who was always being like, yeah, I love nuclear power. You say, do you want to live next to one? No.
Exactly.
Not me. Let's build it out in Uluru, you know?
Yeah.
But the same thing happens. Like they build it every time near a ghetto because they don't have a bunch of lawyers that they can sit there and put injunctions on. So it's just easier to just put it near poor people. So they build it in a ghetto. They're transporting uranium into that area. I can't remember what weapon they used, but it was some kind of projectile weapon. They were trying to carjack the thing. And so they shot at the fucking truck that had uranium in it. Like, it's such a fucking miracle that thing didn't tip over.
Oh my
So lucky.
God.
Like, there's all these things that you don't think about when it comes to tech. All you think about is your cool little, like, but this X180 is going to be built in the year 2016. Like, that kind of shit, you know? Like, you're not thinking about all the other supply lines and all that stuff.
Why were they shooting at a fucking nuclear waste truck?
Because they're idiots that didn't know what the fucking like caution sign meant. And they're just like illiterates from favelas being like, yes, it's a bank truck.
Or they want to sell it.
Well, they want to sell it. That's the other thing.
They could sell it to countries that would pay a lot of money for it, you know?
Are you joking?
No. The ones that want to build nuclear weapons, yeah.
All
right. Boys, last segment.
Not quite, my dude. Here's why nuclear energy is just not a very good solution to climate change. Disclaimer, I studied Canadian energy markets as part of my master's degree in public policy. I'm not an expert, but I know my way around this field. And this is not big oil propaganda. I'm not going to be talking about safety. I'm not going to be talking about nuclear waste. Because nuclear is, on the whole, safer than most forms of energy, and nuclear waste is a problem, but it's not this problem. What I mean when I call nuclear risky is that I mean it's not a very good investment for modern energy markets, and it's not a very good solution to climate change. The two big problems nuclear is facing in this area is cost and time. First, cost. Costs are enormous. Like, really expensive. These plants are huge, highly complicated machines that have to follow stringent government regulations, have massive upfront capital costs, and need skilled labor to build, maintain, and refurbish. Your average 1,000 megawatt nuclear plant can cost $6 to $10 billion to build and take almost 10 years. At 10 years is an average. Obviously, no one's willing to pay that much money up front, not even government, so nuclear plants often search out private investment and government loans to pay for their costs. And that would be fine, except nuclear energy is notorious for running over budget and being late on delivery in construction. I'm not kidding. It's hard to find a single nuclear plant that doesn't have massive cost overruns and delays. There are just so many examples. And while plant financing is complicated, if those delays and cost overruns make the interest rates on the bonds that fund the plant spike, that leads to more cost overruns and more delays and less of an incentive to invest. This problem is so bad that there are 674 nuclear reactors in the world. I want you to guess how many have been financed entirely with private financing in a competitive market. Guess. The answer is 0. Competitive private economy investment did not play a role in the construction of a single nuclear plant on Earth. Meanwhile, solar and wind power, which nuclear is partially competing with, are dirt cheap. Renewables are so cheap that they are actually outpacing subsidies. Governments are canceling renewable energy subsidies because the industry can pay for itself. And need I remind you, these plants take 10 years to construct, and we just don't have that long. 10 years from now is a third of the way towards the US's goal of being net zero carbon by 2050, which most scientists still think is not ambitious enough. And since plants don't generate electricity and in fact just contribute carbon until they are done, it doesn't make any sense to invest in them. And yes, while CANDU reactors and small modular tech are promising, they are unproven. Unproven is a long way from being viable, and viable is a long way from being profitable. This is not fossil fuel propaganda. This has nothing to do with the science. Nuclear can be safer than other forms of energy generation. The waste problem can be solved with enough investment. But on the economics of nuclear energy, there just isn't much of a debate. It's not a financially wise investment, and it's not a good solution to climate change. I want this tech to work. I want politicians and businesses to think on long-term timescales, but that's not where we are right now. You could be totally in favor of more research and development into smaller, safer, less costly nuclear tech, but the way we do nuclear right now is just not a good investment for modern energy markets.